This wasn't a haunted house, it was a house that fought back. In the long history of American hauntings, few cases have sparked as much controversy, disbelief, fear, and lasting debate as the Smurl family haunting. Some believe it was one of the most violent and disturbing paranormal cases ever documented in the United States. Others argue it was nothing more than mass hysteria, psychological stress, religious fear, and media exaggeration. But for nearly 15 years, an ordinary family living in a quiet Pennsylvania town claimed they were being terrorized by something intelligent, aggressive, and deeply malicious, something that watched them, something that followed them from room to room, something that scratched them, something that spoke, and according to their testimony, something that physically attacked them. This was not a fleeting experience. It did not last days or weeks. It lasted years. This is not a ghost story whispered around a campfire. This is not folklore passed down through generations. This is the Smurl Haunting, a case that drew in Catholic priests, psychologists, skeptics, journalists, law enforcement, and America's most famous paranormal investigators, Ed and Lorraine Warren. And at the center of it all is one unsettling question. What happens when a haunting doesn't just scare you, but targets you? Tonight, we unravel the full story of the Smurl Haunting, not as Hollywood dramatized it, but as it unfolded slowly, painfully, and publicly inside a family that never truly escaped its shadow. America before the haunting. Why this case exploded. To understand why the Smurl Haunting became such a cultural flashpoint, we must first understand when it happened. The mid-1970s were a period of profound uncertainty in the United States. Trust in government had collapsed after Watergate. The Vietnam War had left psychological scars across an entire generation. Traditional authority, religious, political, and scientific, was being questioned. At the same time, interest in the paranormal surged. Books about UFOs, demonic possession, psychic abilities, and hauntings dominated bestseller lists. Television programs explored the unexplained with increasing seriousness. And in 1973, one film changed everything. The Exorcist. For the first time, evil was portrayed not as metaphor, but as an invasive, intelligent force that could enter ordinary homes and target ordinary families. The American public was primed for fear, and fear was already looking for a place to land. West Pittston, Pennsylvania, a town unprepared for legend. West Pittston was never meant to become infamous. A small coal mining town nestled along the Susquehanna River. It was the kind of place where routines were predictable and reputations mattered. People worked hard, neighbors knew each other, and problems stayed private. There were no haunted landmarks, no dark legends, no supernatural reputation, until one family spoke up. The Smurl family, before everything went wrong. Jack Smurl was not a man chasing attention. He was a blue-collar worker, practical, blunt, and emotionally reserved. He believed in logic, routine, and responsibility. His wife, Janet Smurl, was deeply devoted to her family, protective, quiet, faith-oriented, but not extreme. Together, they were raising their daughters with the same values they had grown up with: stability, discipline, and privacy. In 1974, the Smurls moved into a modest duplex on Chase Street. There was nothing remarkable about it, no known tragedies, no violent history, no whispered rumors. For years, nothing happened. This detail is critical, because whatever happened next did not begin as a spectacle. It began as a nuisance. The first disturbances. Two small, to fear. The earliest signs were so subtle they were almost dismissed. Unpleasant odors drifted through the house, not rotting smells, but strange, chemical ones. Sulfur, burning rubber, metal. They appeared suddenly and vanished without explanation. Lights flickered occasionally. The television malfunctioned. Doors opened or closed when no one touched them. The Smurls did what any rational family would do. They blamed old wiring, plumbing issues, faulty appliances. No panic, no fear, just annoyance. When sound replaced silence, then came the noises. Footsteps pacing the hallway at night. Heavy, deliberate steps, scratching inside walls where no animals were found. Furniture shifting just slightly when no one touched it. At first, Jack told himself it was imagination. But imagination doesn't move furniture. And imagination doesn't repeat itself night after night. The feeling that changed everything. The moment fear entered the house was not dramatic. It was subtle. The unmistakable sensation of being watched. Not vaguely, not passively, intentionally. Multiple family members described the same feeling, independently, eyes following them from room to room. A presence lingering just outside their vision, an awareness that something else was there. They didn't talk about it at first. Each believed they were alone in feeling it. When they finally spoke, they realized they were not, and once fear moved in, it never left. Part 2. When the house learned their fear. There is a moment in every haunting when denial collapses, when rational explanations stop working, when coincidence feels deliberate, when fear becomes unavoidable. For the Smurl family, that moment arrived quietly, and then all at once. The house begins to respond. By the late 1970s, the disturbances inside the Chase Street duplex were no longer occasional. They were patterned. Unexplained smells returned frequently, stronger now, lingering longer. The family described them as nauseating, sulfur-like, sometimes mixed with the scent of decay. Lights flickered more aggressively, televisions turned on and off by themselves, doors slammed shut with force. What disturbed Jack Smurl most wasn't the activity itself, it was the timing. The disturbances occurred late at night, during emotional moments, when someone was alone. The house no longer felt random, it felt responsive. The children see what adults don't want to believe. The Smurl daughters were the first to report visual encounters. At first, they described shadows, shapes darker than darkness, moving along walls or standing motionless in corners. When questioned, they gave consistent descriptions. Tall, humanoid, featureless. They spoke of figures that vanished when stared at directly. Then came the whispers, soft voices, calling their names from empty rooms. Not threatening, not loud, inviting. The children refused to sleep alone. Nightmares became constant. Bedwetting returned long after childhood. Janet initially believed stress was to blame, until she saw something herself. The night Janet stopped doubting. One evening, Janet entered a bedroom and saw what she described as a shadow figure standing near the wall. It did not move, it did not speak, it simply watched. When she blinked, it vanished. She said nothing that night, but doubt was gone. Jack Smurl, a man unraveling. Jack Smurl was not prone to fantasy. He believed in tools, labor, and tangible solutions. That's why what happened to him disturbed him deeply. Jack began entering rooms where furniture had been rearranged. Chairs rotated, tables shifted inches. He experienced sudden emotional changes, unprovoked rage, crushing depression, intense anxiety. He described pressure on his chest while lying in bed, the sensation of being pinned down. Burning sensations appeared on his skin. Scratches formed without explanation. Doctors examined him. They found nothing. That frightened him more than any ghost story ever could. The first direct confrontation. One night, exhausted and angry, Jack shouted into the darkness, "Who are you?" The response came immediately. A loud crash from another room. Not random. A reply. From that moment on, Jack believed one thing with certainty. Whatever was in the house could hear them. And it understood fear. Escalation, the house turns hostile. As the years passed, the disturbances intensified. Objects were thrown across rooms, hard enough to dent walls. Cabinet doors slammed violently. Loud banging echoed through the house late at night. Friends noticed it. Visitors reported chills, unexplained fear, sudden nausea. Some refused to return. The family felt trapped, financially unable to leave, emotionally exhausted, spiritually confused. And then the attacks began. When the line was crossed, according to Jack and Janet Smurl, the entity crossed a line. They claimed they were physically assaulted. Jack described being shoved downstairs, held down in bed by unseen force, scratched violently. Janet reported being touched by invisible hands, pulled, restrained. Most disturbing were the claims of sexual assault. These allegations instantly divided public opinion. Such claims were rare, deeply uncomfortable, and immediately questioned. But the Smurls insisted these acts were intentional, targeted, humiliating, designed to dominate. The entity they believed was escalating. Fear becomes daily life. Sleep deprivation set in. The children cried at night. Jack stopped sleeping deeply. Janet became hypervigilant. The house no longer felt like shelter. It felt like a predator's territory. Seeking help. Science fails first. Desperate, the Smurls sought professional help. Psychologists evaluated the family. Doctors searched for medical explanations. Specialists tested environmental factors. Carbon monoxide poisoning, mold exposure, mental illness. Nothing explained the shared experiences. Some professionals suggested stress-induced hallucinations, sleep paralysis, suggestibility, but none could explain. Multiple witnesses, physical marks, visitors reporting phenomena. The family felt dismissed, and desperation deepened, turning to faith. Raised Catholic, the Smurls turned to the church. Priests visited the home. Prayers were recited, blessings were performed. For brief periods, the activity stopped, then returned, stronger. Religious objects were knocked over. Bibles fell to the floor, crucifixes moved. The message felt clear. You are not welcome here, but neither are you leaving. The decision that changed everything. By the early 1980s, the Smurls were out of options. They could not afford to move. They could not endure staying. And so they made a decision that would change their lives forever. They contacted Ed and Lorraine Warren. The Smurls believed help was coming. But what arrived instead was attention, scrutiny, and a level of fear they were not prepared for. Because once the Warrens entered the house, the haunting stopped hiding. Part 3. When the Warrens entered the house. When Ed and Lorraine Warren arrived at the Smurl home, they did not treat it like a ghost case. They treated it like a war zone. Because according to them, the house on Chase Street wasn't haunted. It was infested. The Warrens' first impression. The Warrens arrived in the mid-1980s, already famous and controversial. They had investigated Amityville, Annabelle, dozens of alleged demonic cases. Skeptics accused them of exaggeration. Believers saw them as the last line of defense. Lorraine Warren claimed she felt something immediately, not fear, pressure. She described the house as heavy, like the air itself resisted breathing. Ed Warren later said, "This place doesn't want us here." 4 entities, not one. After conducting what they described as a preliminary spiritual assessment, the Warrens made a startling claim. There were 4 entities inside the house. Not one ghost, not one demon. 4. According to Lorraine, an elderly woman, harmless, confused. A young girl, disoriented, lost. A violent male spirit, aggressive, a demonic presence, controlling the others. The demonic entity, they claimed, was the source of the attacks. It fed on fear, manipulated emotion, used lesser spirits as tools. Why this case terrified the Warrens? The Warrens had encountered violent hauntings before, but this case was different. The entity did not hide. It did not retreat. It engaged. Lorraine described being touched. Ed reported objects moving during prayer. They claimed the entity reacted strongly to religious intervention. That, to them, was proof of something darker. The demonic infestation theory. The Warrens classified the Smurl case as a demonic infestation, a stage beyond haunting. According to their belief system, a haunting involves a spirit bound to a place. An infestation involves an intelligent, malicious presence. Possession targets individuals. Infestation targets families. The goal is domination. And the Smurls, they believed, were under attack. Religious intervention escalates. Priests were summoned. Blessings intensified. Holy water was used throughout the home. For short periods, the activity stopped, then returned violently. Doors slammed, objects flew, whispers returned. The Warrens believed the entity was retaliating, testing boundaries, punishing resistance. The Warrens' warning. Ed Warren delivered a chilling message to the family. You are dealing with something that wants to break you. They warned the Smurls, do not challenge it, do not provoke it, do not attempt rituals alone. But they also admitted something terrifying. They could not remove it. The decision to go public. The Warrens believed secrecy was dangerous. They encouraged the family to document everything, write it down, speak openly, seek witnesses. They believed exposure could weaken the entity, but exposure brings consequences. The storm that followed. When the Smurl case went public in 1986, the reaction was immediate and brutal. Television interviews, newspaper headlines, national attention, and skepticism. Psychologists criticized the Warrens. Scientists dismissed the claims. Journalists accused exaggeration. Neighbors avoided the family. Strangers mocked them. The haunting did not stop, but now the Smurls were being attacked from both sides. The entity adapts. According to the Smurls, the activity changed. Less overt violence, more psychological pressure. Nightmares intensified. Whispers grew clearer. Fear deepened. The Warrens believed the entity was adjusting, learning. The most controversial claim. The Warrens alleged something that shocked even believers, that the entity mocked prayer, that it mimicked voices, that it laughed. To skeptics, this was proof of fabrication. To believers, it was proof of intelligence. When help was no longer enough, despite continued religious intervention, nothing removed the entity. The family was exhausted, financially ruined, emotionally fractured, socially isolated. The Warrens advised the unthinkable. Leave the house. But leaving would not end the haunting, because according to the Smurls, Whatever was tormenting them was not bound to the walls. It was bound to them. Part 4. When the world turned against them. There is a special kind of terror that comes from being afraid in your own home. But there is another kind, quieter, colder, and far more destructive. It's the terror of not being believed. By the time the Smurl Haunting reached the national spotlight, the family was no longer just fighting an unseen presence. They were fighting public opinion, the media storm. After the Smurls went public in 1986, the story spread fast. Television networks aired interviews, newspapers ran headlines about America's most violent haunting. Radio hosts debated whether the family was delusional or deceptive. The house on Chase Street became infamous, and the Smurls became targets. Strangers drove past the home at all hours. Some shouted insults, others demanded proof. The family felt watched, not just by the entity, but by the world. Neighbors turned away in West Pittston. The reaction was swift and unforgiving. Neighbors stopped visiting. Friends crossed the street to avoid them. Children at school were mocked. Some locals claimed the Smurls were embarrassing the town. Others accused them of exploiting fear for attention. The isolation deepened, and inside the house, the activity continued. Skeptics enter the house. Parapsychologists requested access. Skeptical investigators arrived with recording equipment, EMF meters, and cameras. They found nothing conclusive. No measurable anomalies, no recorded voices, no undeniable footage. To skeptics, this was proof the haunting wasn't real. To the Smurls, it felt like another door slammed shut. Psychological explanations. Mental health professionals offered alternate explanations: shared delusion, stress-induced hallucination, sleep deprivation, confirmation bias. They pointed out years of financial strain, media reinforcement, religious suggestion. The Smurls listened. And still, the experiences continued. They weren't seeking validation. They were seeking relief. The family fractures. Years of fear took their toll. Arguments increased. Patience disappeared. Trust eroded. Jack withdrew emotionally. Janet lived in constant vigilance. The children carried fear into adulthood. The house no longer just held something dark. It was creating darkness. The Warrens under fire. As skepticism grew, Ed and Lorraine Warren became targets as well. Critics accused them of exaggeration, fear-mongering, financial motivation. Their credibility was challenged publicly. But the Warrens stood firm. They never recanted. They maintained that the Smurl case was real and dangerous. The last attempts at intervention, religious authorities were contacted again. More blessings, more prayers, more attempts. Each time, the activity paused and then resumed. The entity, if it existed, was not leaving willingly. The decision to leave. Eventually, the Smurls reached a breaking point. They could not stay. But leaving felt like surrender. They feared the entity would follow. And in some ways, it did. After the move, when the Smurls finally left Chase Street, the disturbances reportedly continued for a short time. Strange sounds, unexplained sensations, nightmares. Then gradually, they stopped. The silence was unsettling. New occupants, no activity. New families moved into the home. They reported nothing unusual. No footsteps, no attacks, no fear. To skeptics, this was confirmation. To believers, it raised a different question. What if the house was never the target? The entity attached to people, not places. One theory gained traction. The presence wasn't haunting the house. It was attached to the family, their emotions, their stress, their vulnerability. Once separated, it lost power. The Smurl haunting didn't end with screams or exorcism. It ended quietly, uncomfortably, and without answers. Part 5. Truth, Trauma, and What Still Haunts Us. When the noise stops, when the house grows quiet, when the witnesses leave, that's when the hardest questions begin. Because silence does not mean answers. The central question at the heart of the Smurl haunting is a single question that has never been resolved. Was something truly supernatural tormenting this family, or did fear itself become the monster? The answer depends entirely on where you stand and why. Theory 1. Demonic infestation. This is the explanation supported by Ed and Lorraine Warren. They believe the Smurls were not dealing with ghosts, but with a demonic infestation, a rare and dangerous phenomenon in which a non-human entity embeds itself into a household. According to this belief, the entity fed on emotional distress. It targeted vulnerability. It escalated when challenged. It weakened when the family left. Supporters point to physical attacks reported by multiple family members, witnesses who experienced fear inside the home, the entity's reaction to religious intervention. For believers, the Smurl case fits a disturbing pattern seen in other alleged demonic cases, not random chaos, but intent. Theory 2. Psychological stress and shared trauma. Skeptics argue that the Smurl haunting can be explained without invoking the supernatural. They point to years of financial hardship, crowded living conditions, long-term stress, sleep deprivation. In high-stress environments, the brain can misinterpret sensory information. Once fear takes hold, it reinforces itself. This theory suggests hallucinations became shared through suggestion. Normal sounds were misinterpreted. Media attention reinforced belief. The mind, when under siege, can create monsters more convincing than ghosts. Theory 3. Media amplification. Once the Warrens became involved, the story gained national attention. Television interviews, sensational headlines, public debate. Critics argue the narrative became exaggerated. Each retelling added detail. Each interview sharpened fear. Each headline raised stakes. The Smurls may not have lied, but memory is not static. It evolves, especially under pressure. Theory 4. Something in between. Some experts refuse to choose sides. They believe something unusual occurred. Not all experiences were imaginary. Not all were paranormal. Trauma does not require demons to be devastating. Fear does not need ghosts to be real, and unexplained does not always mean supernatural. Why the Smurl haunting still matters. The Smurl case endures because it challenges certainty. There is no definitive proof, no final confession, no recorded entity, just testimony and fear. Whether the threat was external or internal, the suffering was real. Families were damaged, reputations were destroyed, lives were altered permanently. That alone makes the case worth examining. The legacy of the case. Today, the Smurl home stands quiet. No warning signs, no crowds, no whispers. But the story remains, referenced in documentaries, debated in forums, cited in paranormal studies. It continues to divide believers and skeptics because it lives in the space between evidence and experience. Final thought. If something follows you, watches you, hurts you, does it matter whether it's supernatural? If the terror is real? Because the most disturbing hauntings aren't always caused by ghosts. Sometimes they're caused by belief, and belief can be just as powerful. If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of America's most controversial paranormal cases, consider what side you fall on, haunting or hysteria. and ask yourself one final question. If it happened to you, would you be believed?